The remarkable research coming from Europe's higher education sector is creating opportunities for economic growth across the continent. It's a tremendously exciting time for universities, industry, and for all players in innovation. But, as we know, with great power comes great responsibility. There are all kinds of issues and responsibilities arising out of research and innovation, and over the next 2 days we will look at some of them. We can look forward to some great talks on important themes, including gender equality, open access and ethics, and I'm delighted that Trinity staff are among those who will robustly engage in these debates over the next 2 days. But for this welcome address, I want to say something about the importance for responsible research and innovation of independent institutions. I want to touch on one of the central tenets of democratic and innovative societies, the separation of powers. You are all familiar with Montesquieu's separation of powers into the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And of course, you all know that to these three were added a fourth estate, the press or the media, which should also act independently in a functioning democracy. Apparently, the great political theorist Edmund Burke was the first to use the phrase fourth estate to describe the press in 1787. Edmund Burke was a Trinity graduate, and indeed his portrait hangs here in this very hall down there at the back and to my right. So much do we regard Burke as important that we have a statue to him, indeed, also outside the front gate of the college. The importance of independent media has now taken a firm hold around the world. Press freedom is monitored internationally, and a country which censors or unduly controls the press is not regarded as truly democratic. Montesquieu came up with 3 powers, and Burke added a 4th. But of course, it's not about numbers. What counts is the separation between the different actors in a civic society. Each must function independently and must be enabled, and indeed compelled, to take responsibility for their actions. Another example of such democratic players is industry. We do not, in Europe today, see it as desirable that industries are directly controlled by governments. What is the situation for universities and centres for higher learning? Do we include them among the democratic actors who must function independently in the public interest? This is not an easy question to answer, not for Ireland and not for Europe as a whole. In Trinity College, we have enshrined academic freedom in our statutes, where it is defined, and I quote, as the freedom subject to the norms of scholarly inquiry to conduct research, teach, speak and publish without interference or penalty, no matter where the search for truth and understanding may lead. The idea of governments influencing research decisions doesn't sit easily with the sector. It raises the spectre of states funding only research which fits with some master plan. Research-led universities, like this one, like Trinity College, are particularly concerned to maintain freedom of action here, because what we research ultimately decides what we teach. Universities are encouraged to commercialise research, and this is unequivocally a good thing. But there are dangers in the market being allowed to influence research decisions too directly. I won't go into these dangers now. Most of you here will have already considered them. My point is that people who say that they recognise the importance of academic freedom are well capable, in the same breath, of advocating that only research projects with an immediate commercial potential, which they themselves identify, get financed. This controlled environment is not the wellspring of innovation. Quite the contrary. There is currently a bill going through the legislative process in Ireland called the Universities Amendment Bill, which could allow the government to send an investigator into a university to decide who is employed and on what basis, and to decide the pay and conditions of staff without reference to the university's governing board. There has been little public outcry over this bill, which suggests to me a lack of understanding of the value to society of independent universities. I can only speak about Ireland, but I do have knowledge of the higher education sector in Europe from my time in university in Italy and the Netherlands, and from my recent appointment to the board of the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, the EIT. My impression is that many European countries do have more clarity, but I suggest that in most countries a similar level of debate and confusion would greet the following question. To what extent do universities currently, and should universities ideally, have decision-making powers in terms of being able to decide how to finance themselves, set tuition fees, who to hire, how to remunerate, what and how to research, and what and how to teach? As we answer this question, I think we need to continuously articulate that universities serve the public good as well as conferring a private benefit. The public good is not only the education of doctors, teachers, lawyers, writers, scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, and others who provide essential services and drive the economy, but also the education of citizens for participatory democracy. In an address last year, the President of Ireland, Michael D. Higgins, centralised this role very well. He asked, and I quote, "Are the universities to be allowed, and will they seek, to challenge paradigms of the connection between the economy and society, ethics and morality, democratic discourse and authoritarian impositions that have failed?" Our understanding of higher education as a private and a public good informs the kind of education we offer. In a whole variety of ways, we encourage critical, independent thinking, initiative and entrepreneurship. Our education is research-led, and our students engage in original and scholarly research alongside their professors. And we know that learning is not only what happens in the lecture theatre or the lab. Our students develop initiative and responsibility through event organising, fundraising, competing, debating, and taking on leadership roles in student-led organisations. And we are proud of our rate of spin-out companies in Trinity, which has averaged at 7 new companies per year since 2007. A Trinity spin-out, the DNA profiling company Identigen came up with the technology that the Food Safety Authority of Ireland used to expose the horsemeat scandal in beef products. There's great support for the kind of education we offer. No one, not our students, parents, government or employers, is arguing against our emphasis on original research, on student-led organisations, on innovation. There is agreement that these are beneficial to the individual and to society at large. Everyone is agreed that we need to nurture independent thinking and leadership skills in our students, and that we must carry out research that is open, non-authoritarian in its environment. And yet, when it comes to the question of universities' independence, of staffing decisions, budgets and research teaching decisions, there is suddenly less consensus. How can we encourage independence and responsibility in our students unless we ourselves are independent and accountable? How can we encourage decision-making skills when we cannot ourselves take decisions? How can we innovate in an environment of control and curtailment? To make the analogy, if newspapers were under government remit, could they then carry out independent investigative journalism? And it's precisely because universities are increasingly valuable engines for economic growth that issues of independence, freedom and accountability have become critical. If you look at the great innovation universities of the world, what characterises them is a great degree of autonomy. We should have far more of this in Europe. We could go so far, indeed, as to state that the ability to act independently is a key innovator of innovation. However, the rate of change has been so fast that we hardly had time to pause and get a handle on it. In a matter of decades, universities have changed from ivory towers into the roaring engines of knowledge economies. And yet, we have yet to take the measure of this new power. To rephrase Voltaire, with increased power should come increased responsibility. Unfortunately, the current climate of austerity has bred an atmosphere of control and over-direction, in Ireland particularly. It's easy to see how it happened. When governments have to take over banks and regulate financial bodies, it can become second nature to seek to gather all public institutions under a government remit. And I believe this kind of thinking has crept up on us rather than being actively encouraged. But it is now time to call a halt to it. Edmund Burke, who's looking down on us in this exam hall here, coined the phrase the Fourth Estate at a time when the press was gathering strength and becoming a professional force. Naturally, governments sought to influence this new force and sometimes succeeded. But the press was able to articulate a sense of itself as separate and independent. Today, with the growth of online media, bloggers and WikiLeaks, the Fourth Estate faces unprecedented challenges. But it is helped in confronting those challenges by its distinct sense of identity that it has carved out for itself over the past 200 years or so. I would like to see universities gaining this kind of identity. At the moment, the picture across Europe is confused. Some universities have a lot of autonomy, others have very little. Some, like Trinity College Dublin, are trying to articulate their role in a civic society. Others are not yet asking those questions. The EU celebrates diversity, but it is, of course, premised on cohesion, on countries and sectors acting together. The European third-level sector should be diverse, a dynamic mix of universities and different complementary missions, but there should be a shared sense of the importance of independence, of autonomy, and of the need to develop the governance structures that support it. Today's summit seeks to develop a European model for responsible research and innovation. And I submit to you that a crucial step towards developing responsible research is for universities to be allowed to take full responsibility for what they do. Thank you very much.